Johnson with Intention to Balance, a wellness company that specializes in essential oils. And you are listening to Holistic Lifestyles, which is a program that we designed to really help people understand all the different natural modalities that are available to us. As I say, no side effects. And I have a great guest today that I'm excited to have you here. His name is Sal Salerno, and he is a PhD in sociology, and he was a professor at the Minneapolis Community Technical College for holistic health and social science and healing arts. And so, but today we're here really to talk about acupuncture. And I'm so excited we met and talked a lot about it, and it's a big topic, but it's one that I know is becoming more and more mainstream that people want to hear about. So welcome, Sal.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. So glad that you're here. So, well, let's jump in and start out, just if you can explain so people really understand, what is acupuncture and how does it work?
Well, it's a big question, and many of the ways it works is sort of a mystery in many respects. It's essentially about balancing the body's energy, and that's done through the use of acupuncture needles, or sometimes herbs alone, or sometimes both acupuncture and herbs. So basically it's something that looks to balancing the energy that flows through the body. And that's the short answer, right?
That's the short answer, because that's what I really want to do is help people understand, why it works. And I know you do 5 elements.
I do 5-element style acupuncture. All acupuncturists are trained in traditional Chinese medicine, and that is what you need to learn in order to practice. And then once people learn traditional Chinese medicine, they may take on another specialty. There are many different styles of acupuncture. Acupuncture, as it traveled to various countries, was altered a bit. So there's a Japanese style, there's a Korean style, there's a Vietnamese style, many different ones. And the way I practice is in the 5-element style. And again, 5-element also has a number of different versions. The most common one in the United States is the one that was developed by Jack Worsley. And he was a British citizen that managed to get behind the Iron Curtain and learned from various sources. He was never very forthcoming about exactly how he learned it. But basically the idea of 5-element is that everyone comes into the world deficient in one of the 5 elements. And the 5 elements are fire, earth, metal, water, and wood. And so the object of the acupuncturist is to determine which element the person is deficient in, and then to treat them on that element so that they're supported in the way that they're typically deficient. And 5-element is more of a constitutional form of acupuncture, as opposed to traditional Chinese medicine, which often is symptom-driven. But again, I don't want to say that because it's symptom-driven, it also doesn't contribute to helping a person constitutionally.
Yeah.
It's just a different emphasis, a different focus. And I would think also maybe one of the important things to mention in relationship to 5-element is that I think it takes into account the emotional and spiritual body and addresses that as one of the major sources of illness.
Nice.
So, it attempts to help keep body and spirit together, so to speak.
I love that. And how do you best determine which element is out of balance?
Well, it's kind of a long process. You do an interview and you kind of look at the person's health history. The way that it's determined in Chinese medicine is by trying to get a sense of the emotion that may be out of balance. Sometimes you can see in the person's face a particular color, or you may sense an odor, or you listen to the sound in the voice. All of these you can imagine as different legs of a stool. And sometimes you'll only get one leg. Sometimes you'll get two. It's not often that you get four. The body has to be really pretty far out of balance to emit an odor that is that easy to detect.
Right. And odors, I know we talked about before,
Right.
like it's like peeling an onion, right?
Yes.
So sometimes there's so many people that expect just immediate results a lot of times. But I mean, have you had that with people, or is it normally a process?
It's a process, and that relates more to the treatment than the diagnosis. That in treating a person, often various symptoms will initially appear. Some of them may go away in the first session, others may take longer. In Chinese medicine, the oldest book that survived was one that's called The Yellow Emperor's Canon of Internal Medicine. And of course, it's full of pearls of wisdom, so to speak. And
Right.
one of those is that don't wait to be thirsty to dig the well.
Right.
And we're taught, or we're socialized in this culture to not really show up until our symptoms are very pronounced, and then the doctor treats us with pharmaceutical. In Chinese medicine, it's kind of the opposite of that. The wise person, so to speak, seeks treatment when they're well. And the object is not to just get 2 treatments and you're done. Your symptoms are gone and you're healthy and
Right.
you're done with acupuncture for the rest of your life. But rather, it's more like a lifestyle. And with my clients, initially, I may have to treat them frequently in the initial stages of the treatment. And then as time goes by, the object is to treat them once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month. And then if they're really people that do their homework,
Right.
that, they exercise, they watch their diet, they go to sleep at a reasonable time, and they're really people that take care of their health very carefully. We may only treat them when the season changes.
And do you help people with those other things?
I do, yes, I
Oh,
do.
nice.
In Chinese medicine, food is considered to be medicine.
Yes.
And so we have a lot of training in nutrition, as well as application of herbs and herbal formulas.
Nice, like Hippocrates, right?
Yes, let food be thy medicine.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And now, I believe you said that there's 250 or 350 meridians in the body?
No,
or
not points.
Points.
Acupuncture points. 350 acupuncture points. There are 12 meridians
12
that relate to
meridians.
organs, and 2 others that do not relate to organs. So, there's 14 that typically are part of treatment.
So it had to have taken a lot of training and time.
4 years.
4 years.
Yep.
I know you're board certified in
acupuncture,
in
yep.
acupuncture, and also an herbalist
In herbalism, yeah.
too. So it's just interesting to me how you can figure out where to put those needles. And
Right, right. There are a lot of choices.
a lot of choices. But
Yeah.
speaking of the needles, I know that that's a big thing for people or a part of maybe why they
Right.
haven't explored acupuncture is needle safety. So if you can talk a little bit about, why it is safe and kind of,
Sure, I
how
would
it
love
works.
to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Often when people think of needles, they think of the only kind of needle that they've been exposed to, which is a hypodermic needle. And in fact, I was once had a conversation with a doctor, and I happened, as I do now, to have some needles in my pocket, right?
Perfect. Yes.
And so we can do a little demonstration.
Oh, that'd be great.
But, I remove the needle as I'm doing now. And of course, the needles are all sterile.
Yes.
And they're, like plastic wrapped, right?
And they're made of stainless
Steel.
Yeah.
Or sometimes they're gold plated.
Oh, gold plated.
And they're gold plated for purposes of tonification. So this is what the needle looked like. It would probably be pretty hard to see.
Yes, right.
That it's
yes.
almost like hair
Right.
thickness.
It's very thin.
And so the physician looked at the needle for, 15, 20 seconds and looked up and says, it doesn't have a hole.
And nothing can go through it.
Right.
Right?
And so it's puzzling what one would do if the needle doesn't have a hole. If your orientation, of course, is that you're using the needle either to take something out of the body or to add something to the body.
Right.
But the needle does that. I mean, the needle redirects the flow of qi in the body, and that's how the needle works. So the acupuncturist typically uses a tube like this, oops, and the tube is a requirement of OSHA, but the tube is also an ancient device, and the tube is intended to fool the skin, so that when the needle penetrates through the skin, you typically don't feel that.
Right.
And I'm not on an acupuncture point right now, I'm just for purposes of demonstration. There is a sensation that's connected to the moment when the needle hits the point. And then it's the acupuncturist then manipulates the needle in order to redirect the flow of qi.
Interesting. I still remember when my son had to get a shot in his arm, and
Right.
like even watching that, and he just like stiffened up, and the needle got stuck in his arm, and it was an awful day.
Yeah.
And I've had acupuncture, and I can't even feel
Right.
the needles at all. So
In the Japanese style, if the client feels the needle, it's viewed as disturbing the qi.
oh,
And so the object is not to have the person feel anything. Whereas in Chinese medicine, there is the strong stimulation. And typically the person will say to the acupuncturist, da qi, meaning you got qi.
oh,
And qi, of course, is the life force.
yes,
So there's often that kind of relationship between the practitioner and the client, where the client is giving feedback
nice.
in terms. And sometimes one feels actually in the needle, in the wound part of the needle, you can often feel when the needle connects with the acupuncture point.
And so, as I understand it, that it, like you might have blockages, and the needles, how do they unblock you?
Yes.
Basically,
Yes.
the meridians. or
Basically,
the-
in Chinese medicine, the reason that a person, say, would feel pain is because there's blockage. And there's blockage in a meridian, or there may be blockage in the tissue. I mean, it depends on the type of pain that we're talking about. So yes, the needle has that ability to unblock the qi. And sometimes you can feel that there is blockage in meridians, in feeling the pulses. And that's another aspect of the diagnostic process that we were talking about earlier, when we were saying that, you know, the diagnosis is based on odor, color, sound, and emotion, the person's health history, but also along the radial artery on both sides are 3 different positions. The first one would be for the lung and large intestine, second one for spleen and stomach. The third one on this side is something called the triple heater and the pericardium. On the opposite side would be heart and small intestine, liver and gallbladder, and kidney and urinary bladder. And so there's 12 different positions and around 30 different types of pulse patterns. So you can have a slippery pulse, a wiry pulse, a leathery pulse, a intermittent pulse,
Wow.
a hesitating pulse, many different types of pulses that all have diagnostic significance, as well as blockages between channels. If you, we don't have a picture of this, but there's like a circadian clock that
Yeah.
shows how the qi, the life force, travels from one organ to another. And sometimes there can be blockage, say, between the point at which the bladder gives its energy to the small intestine. And so undoing that block means choosing an entry and exit point on the meridian in order to take the block out.
So
and
interesting.
then you would proceed with the treatment once you've removed the block.
So can you even tell from people's pulse?
Yes,
You do
yes, you can tell that from the pulse.
So,
You can't tell, the thing you can't tell from the pulse is what side the meridian might be deficient in. And that's
Oh.
another thing, that's another aspect of it.
right.
That you can't feel in the pulses, and there's another test for that. And that gets probably a little bit on the, too
Right,
much on the technical
right,
side,
right,
right?
right.
Yeah, yeah.
And I know, I mean, I have a whole list of things that you help people with
Right,
the acupuncture.
right.
Is there typical things that people come to see you for, or? does it-
Well,
I know we talked about
yeah,
people
we talked
usually,
about, and
they
I'm
don't
just,
come,
I'm just trying to
people
give
come
you
when
a
they're
good answer here.
sick, not well, which
Right.
would be better,
right.
but,
I think the way to think about us is we're like general practitioners, which is kind of more and more difficult to find because everyone is going into such specialized areas. So sometimes people may become aware of an imbalance that they didn't know they had. And that in Chinese medicine, the ways that we look at imbalances are quite different from the way that they're diagnosed in Western medicine. So that's part of the issue, is that sometimes there's not real direct translation. But generally speaking, you know, I treat a lot of people with metabolic issues, whether that could be high blood pressure, high cholesterol, incipient diabetes, type 2 diabetes. I help people with, you know, musculoskeletal issues, help people with psychological, emotional issues, with allergies, with autoimmune conditions. But, you know, I sometimes find myself also treating people that have dementia or Alzheimer's, or people that have traumatic brain injury. So, you know, it just kind of depends on what comes my way.
right.
And again, I mean, part of what I do is I see whether the acupuncture will help, and if it doesn't, then I try to help the client find a person that might be better suited to treating them. But the bottom line, as far as traditional Chinese medicine is concerned, is that it does treat almost all conditions. We do not remove organs or set broken bones.
Thank you.
Right? But, you know, again, generally speaking, some of the most important things that we do to heal is to sleep properly, to be able to eat food,
Yes, right.
and to be able to eliminate what we eat. And often when people are ill, those things are affected.
Exactly.
So people going through chemo, for example, might also seek me out for issues with nausea, or, you know, problems with appetite, or difficulty sleeping, or pain meds not working. For all those reasons, people might seek out an acupuncturist,
Yeah.
such as myself.
It's also interesting because I know even with, that's one thing I learned working with essential oils, that sometimes people's anger or anxiety, they were just out of balance. And oil, you know, sometimes was amazing how that could help them get back into balance. It's just always so curious to me.
Yes.
And I know,
I mean, sometimes we really don't know. I think that I mentioned to you examples of people that I've treated that have food allergies.
right.
And food allergies, the problem with them is that they can express themselves in a variety of ways. And I think the example that I gave was a client that had eczema and was treated with steroids, and that the steroids were not at all very helpful. I mean, they were helpful in the moment and got the person through the symptom, but the symptom kept coming back. And it turned out in that case that the person had kind of allergies to both dairy and gluten.
Yeah.
And eliminating those things, of course, was very helpful in terms of clearing up the skin condition.
Yeah. And I love
Or-
hearing that because I'm totally on board with getting the body, you know, back in balance too, and the gut healthy. And
Or yeah, or
All that.
another person that had like chronic acid indigestion, and that was a situation that was related to milk, and that the person really couldn't tolerate milk. But I hate to use this analogy, but it's an effective one.
Yeah.
That if you put a frog in warm water and turn the heat up, the frog lives for a long time. If you throw it into boiling water, it dies pretty immediately. And that it essentially means, we're adaptive to a certain extent. So people adapt to the allergy and they don't know that they have it. I was with another client of mine yesterday that realized that they had a gluten allergy, and that they were talking about how they took a bite out of their husband's sandwich and then just had a horrible, horrible night. And then I reminded them that previous to giving up the gluten, that it was not a problem, that they really didn't sense that all of the digestive problems they had were just due to eating the wrong things.
Right. I go through that in my own life. I mean, people ask, like, why don't you want to have some of that food? And I'm like, I really don't, because of the way it would make me feel afterwards. And I said, it's not even desirable to me anymore. But you're also a herbalist. So
Yes.
how do you use herbs with every client, or how do you use that in your practice?
Basically, I tend to not introduce herbs for a while, because typically acupuncture will take care of most of the problems, or eliminating things like foods, or looking really critically at a diet and thinking about what parts of the diet might help the person given the person's condition.
Right. And that's what part of why I love this whole program is helping people look at things as a first line of defense before they go to something that might not serve them as well, and is just a Band-Aid and won't actually fix the problem.
That it doesn't really get at the underlying cause.
Yes.
And that we're, I think, a society that really does treat symptoms, and that often we don't get to the root causes.
Yeah.
And this is kind of what I see with people coming in, like another great example. And I think we have the Mayo Clinic and a study that was done by the Mayo Clinic to thank, that they found out that antibiotics were pretty useless for rhinitis, for sinus infections, and that sinus infections were not bacterial, but instead were fungal, the majority of them.
Right.
And so, because most of the Chinese herbs are antimicrobial, they end up being a lot more effective in treating that type of problem.
I love that.
And that, again, looking cross-culturally, a good example of diet involves issues of prostate cancer, enlarged prostate, and so forth. When you looked at China, prior to the introduction of dairy products, they had a slight amount of enlarged prostate and prostate cancer. After the introduction of those foods, the rates of both enlarged prostate and prostate cancer just skyrocketed.
Interesting.
I'd like to mention to both my clients and probably to people listening that there's a really great website, nutritionfacts.org.
Oh,
And
nice.
Dr. Greger wrote a book, How Not to Die. And in this book, he offers diets for people that have cancer, people that have prostate issues, people that have digestive disorders. And he has the back of the book is full of helping people figure out what is the best diet to remain healthy, right?
Nice.
And that his website is great because you can ask questions of it, and he will often have a very short video that gives you the latest research.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
I know before we run out of time here, I would love you introduce me to that book, The Yellow
Emperor's Canon of Internal Medicine.
And just how going back thousands of years, how things are similar today, but if
you want me to read from it, I can. Okay.
Just we have a few minutes. We could do that.
This is the book, right?
Yes.
And it's the oldest book to have survived, right? So, and it's approximately 2,000 years old.
Wow. And it was just.
And this is how the book starts. And the book, is the Yellow Emperor consulting with various experts. And it says here, let me find the spot. I have heard that in ancient times the people lived to be over 100 years, and yet they remained active and did not become decrepit in their activities. But nowadays, people reach only half that age and yet become decrepit and failing. Is it because the world changes from generation to generation? I love that part.
Right.
Or is it that mankind is becoming negligent of the laws of nature? And so the answer is, part of the answer at least, is that in ancient times, those people who understood the Tao, the cultivation of the self, patterned themselves upon the yin and the yang, which of course in Chinese medicine are the major principles of nature,
Right.
and they lived in harmony. There was temperance in eating and drinking. Their hours of rising and retiring were regular and not disorderly and wild. By these means, the ancients kept their bodies united with their souls. And again, I see this as the major purpose of acupuncture, is to keep the body united with the soul or the spirit. So as to fulfill their allotted span completely, measuring into 100 years before they passed away.
Wow.
Nowadays, people are not like this. The book continues. They use wine as beverage, and they adopt recklessness as usual behavior. They enter the chamber of love in an intoxicated condition. Their passions exhaust their vital forces. Their cravings dissipate their true essence. They do not know how to find contentment within themselves. They are not skilled in the control of their spirits.
Right.
So I like to think that acupuncture helps people in all those ways.
And we didn't even get a chance to talk about today, but I know you mentioned in Chinese medicine they look at mind and spirit the same. Like it's not.
There's no division between mind and spirit in Chinese medicine. So, and I think when we spoke before, I was using the example of the small intestine because it sorts food, but it also sorts experience. And it sorts emotion too, and the connection between experience and emotion. So it's like we're in one body,
Right.
and we don't have these kinds of divisions. And that's why, initially it may require more treatments, because you have to peel back some of the layers
Right.
of the onion to find that relationship between the body and the spirit.
And I've had people ask me, why do healthy people get sick? And I said, it's stress,
Right.
can be a big one for that, for
Right.
sure. So,
And it's one of the major things that is the major side effect, I should say, of
Right.
acupuncture is that it reduces stress.
yes. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
So, fun.
That's the side effect.
Right? Or side benefit.
Yeah.
Or
Jokingly,
effect,
side
right?
effect.
I know,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
I love it. Well, I know we could talk about so much more. This is such a great topic, and maybe you can come back sometime.
Oh, I would love to. Yes,
But I know
I'd
you
love to.
practice at the Chi House.
I practice at Chi House.
41st
but
and Nicollet, is it? Or?
41st and Chicago.
Oh, Chicago, thank
But
you.
better for people to use my telephone number and email address, because they're still putting me up on the website.
And your email is at the 5 Element?
It's
or is it
5element@yahoo.com.
at yahoo.com.
And should I give cell phone number, or are you going to put that up on a screen?
You can certainly give it, otherwise
Yeah.
we'll put it up.
It's 612-508-5902. And I always say, if people email me at the 5element@yahoo.com and don't hear from me, it may be that they have gone to spam, and so they should just give me a call.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again.
Okay, well, thank
this
you
has just
for
been so
having
much
me
fun.
on your show.
All right.
I really enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. Beautiful.